Hello everybody, I hope you are happy and healthy and you are enjoying your day in whatever phase this new normal you're in. I'm sat in my spare room. It seems to be my new video little spot, and I've noticed just here behind my head is a tapestry that my great auntie Winnie made for me donkeys ago when I was a little girl. I'm going to put a picture of it and do a post on Instagram with it, because it kind of sums up an awful lot of the things that we fear in anorexia recovery, without even, obviously she never created that with eating disorders in mind whatsoever. My great auntie Winnie was actually a master baker. She used to make these most amazing tiny little cakes for a bakery that no longer exists here in Middlesbrough. So food and cakes were definitely huge on the agenda in her house. But the tapestry says, today's the tomorrow you worried about yesterday. And I just think it's quite a nice sentiment, really. And that has got nothing to do with today. Well, I suppose it does have a little bit to do with today's little video. Today's brief chat is a continuation of a theme that people have been asking for. So it seems to be very common that people ask about, how did you get started? What was the moment? How did you actually get yourself into recovery mode? I'm just going to recline and get comfy. The first thing I need to do is obviously this is the next in a series that I've been doing to support anyone who's interested in this way of thinking. I've done a blog on this next one, so go to www.lifeandrecovery.co.uk and you'll see this next blog that this video relates to, and it's actually about the next stage of my process. Now, before I do this little video though about it, this brief chat, just bear in mind please that when you are investigating and looking at things to do with starting points, that my first blog has always just been about just getting started. Just don't over plan it, don't overthink it. You have to just get off those starting blocks. And once you're off those starting blocks and you are eating one meal and one snack at a time, without, when you leave the table and all those mantras, then you can start to do the planning. But don't keep restricting whilst you're planning, because then you're still not in any element of recovery whatsoever. And also, I suppose a second sort of just thing to be a bit mindful of is that all of our journeys are different, and our journeys are our own journeys. Now, we listen to each other, we get advice and support from each other, because that's what is really good and productive about a real committed, real recovery community that we're establishing here on Instagram. But just bear in mind that obviously things might be a little bit different for you. But the big thing is you've got to take responsibility, and you've got to commit, and you've got to go through the pain, and I promise you it does get better. So my first blog, my first little bits and pieces to do with this was that moment that I kind of started to get angry, and I burst out of a group therapy room and started to really commit to real recovery back in January 2019. And the most recent blog talks about the next phase in that process. So what I started to do was really realise quite quickly that I had a food hierarchy list and I had a figure food list, which obviously, we all have. But actually for me, it was going to be a lot more about the behaviours behind food and my feelings and my thoughts and my anxieties that were going to hold the key and be the gateway to my real recovery. So therefore what I did is I started to list, most of us are big listers, aren't we? I started to list the behaviours that I thought were were really behind everything that I was doing, and the things I wanted to really crack. Now, if you read the blog, you'll notice that there was a flaw in this plan, because the minute I started to write this behaviour list, anorexia had hold of it. So my list was practically empty. So I was like, yay, win-win, this is going to be easy. Nah. I then had to be really brave and ask my care team and my family around me to write the list on my behalf. So I got people to record and write down the things that they'd witnessed me doing, or that they knew was part of my process, or that they were concerned about. Now, their list was huge. And that then had that moment of overwhelmed, because I didn't know where to start. I was also angry at anorexia that she'd done this and I hadn't even noticed, but then anorexia was angry at me for opening up in this way. And it was a big old, really difficult period of time, which I go about much more succinctly and articulately in the blog. But then what I started to look for was a golden thread. I thought this massive list is no good to me, because all that happens when you're faced with a list like that is that you start at the top, which might not be the best behaviour to start with in the first place. But then ultimately, because there's so many, you're never going to be able to do them. So you fail, so you give up. So I started to look for the golden thread. I started to look for anything that seemed familiar in these behaviours. And again, I talked this through with my care team. I talked it through with my husband and my best friend. And I came up with a couple of areas. I came up with any element to do with weighing. So that was myself or food or portioning. That kind of encompassed that. Anything to do with keeping a calorie tracker, and anything to do with having to make choices and decisions in the moment. So those were the 3 golden threads that seemed to be the gateway for me. If I could crack them or start at least working on them, then it was going to open up a whole load of food, because in those 3 behaviours were all the food types as well. So I was going to have to face the fact I was going to have to double whammy. So potentially it was going to be more difficult in the moment. But those were the 3 golden threads I needed to do. Now, because I'm a gradual and phased exposure girl, there's no way I was going to be able to do those 3 in one go. So I picked the first one that I thought was going to be the golden thread, the crux to everything, which was weighing and numbers. So I talk about in the blog about how I actually started to do that. There are a number of other videos I've done on Instagram TV, on my YouTube channel, Louisa Recovery Now, which goes into some of the ways in which about weighing and measuring and portioning. And I promise I'm going to follow this up with more of those, because this is such a crucial thing. But my first 2 things with weighing, I stopped weighing myself. Yeah, I stopped weighing myself. I haven't got a clue how much I weigh. Wouldn't have a clue. Wouldn't have an absolute iota these days how much I weigh. So I stopped weighing myself. That was the first one. And it was an interesting first couple of days. I'll be honest. Have a look at the blog, you'll see. And then I picked some areas of food that just seemed totally abnormal to weigh, to sort of really kickstart that this illness was creating behaviours and habits that wasn't about me, or wasn't about actually what normal and real and proper and non-mental illness life was about. So I stopped weighing myself, and then I chose to stop weighing and measuring bread, fruit and vegetables. Those were my first 3. Sounds really, really simple. They sound tiny, but they were massive, really, really difficult things for me to crack in those first few weeks. But the minute I started to stop weighing and stop measuring, things started to suddenly change and open up. Check out my blog, lifeandrecovery.co.uk. Have a look at my Instagram videos for anything else. But that was just a really brief chat about what people wanted me to do next. Stop weighing yourself, and then choose a few things to really stop weighing in terms of actual food portioning, and then bit by bit add. So once those goals are in, and once those that process is in place, then you keep that process and you add the next layer, and you add the next layer. You don't put it in then shove it back out again. You add bit by bit by bit until you know you're cracking loads of behaviours, and before you know it, you're in a healthy position like me, with hair that's far too long, but her face is not quite as red this time as it was in the last video. The next blog and the next video I'll do will be about how I started thinking about breaking my calorie counting record and choices and decisions in the moment. And like I said, I'll do lots of little bitty things again, if that's helpful, about weighing and measuring and stuff. But have a great afternoon, a great day wherever you are. You take care of yourselves, and commit to real recovery, guys, because it's the only way. See you soon. Bye.